Hi, as we leave for our very first conversation, I want to give a shout out and a huge amount of thanks to Humanities New York for underwriting this initiative. Couldn't have done it without them. So thank you, Humanities New York. We're here at the Irish American Heritage Museum to interview our very first person on Let's Have a Conversation, Dr. Elizabeth Stack. Come on in and join me.
So for the month of March, of course, we're delighted to celebrate St. Patrick and everything with Irish culture. And so we have a temporary exhibition on, we'll probably run it into April, but this is the history of Irish dance costumes, and it tells the story of four generations of one family based in Ireland and here in Albany. So come down to see how the costumes evolved over the years and to hear about the history of Irish dancing and how even sometimes the steps evolved. So we're looking forward to having you. So part of my role, of course, is to get funding and grant writing, and we were very fortunate to get a grant from the Irish government, the Department of Foreign Affairs, to build this replica thatched cottage, which is almost true to form. It's 8 foot. A lot of them were 10 foot wide. So you should come down and have a look in the cottage. At the other side we have a tenement apartment, so we kind of show you here at the museum what people came from and what they came to. And of course, adjusting to a new life was difficult, but the old life wasn't always idyllic. And so we're delighted to have this replica cottage and our sheep and our stone wall for you to visit. And at the museum, of course, we have a gift shop, so we have very many Irish crafts, jewellery, books and music, and also these beautiful calendars which are from Ireland, and they have the story of the Irish dressers, but also all of the folklore traditions, and they tell you what day of the month is a special kind of day in either Celtic or Irish history and folklore. So our shop, we're very pleased with it, and we sometimes have Irish food too, so check us out.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining this first issue of Let's Have a Conversation. And I am thrilled today to have Dr. Elizabeth Stack with us. Dr. Stack is the Executive Director of the Irish American Heritage Museum down here in Albany. And so I want to talk to Elizabeth about what brought her to this particular municipality, why she chose the field she chose, what she sees herself doing in the future, and what advice she'd give to women. And so Elizabeth, hello, and thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be, here telling you my story.
Oh, thank you. And so this is very appropriate because it's March, right? And everybody thinks of the Irish in March. We should think about them 12 months out of the year.
Oh, exactly. Well, and here in the museum, of course, we do, but it is Irish American Heritage Month and it's Women's History Month. So I'm delighted to be your first guest, and I tick both boxes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And so let's start with the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So you are from County Kerry.
Yes, exactly. A proud Kerry woman, as all Kerry people are. We get teased about that all the time. So I'm from a small town, Listowel, in County Kerry. Very famous town for writers, so I grew up, it's a heritage town. Our town was the last castle to fall to Queen Elizabeth I in 1603. So very conscious in our town of our history and heritage and literature. I grew up right next door to John B. Keane, who was a famous writer. So, and I remember my first day in history class in high school, my teacher, who was the first male teacher I ever had, because it was all girls, all women before that, Tony Behan, said to me, "Oh, the Stacks are great at history. You'll love history." And I didn't know that I did love history until he told me. So I did. I excelled at history. I think I might have wanted his approval too. But yeah, so from that day on, loved history. Never bothered me that it was dates or, some people are kind of afraid of history. I think it's boring. I never thought history was boring. I always thought it was stories.
Now, quick question, sir. That one teacher said that he thought you'd be good at history. Have you seen him since, and have you told him what he does?
Yeah. So he's thrilled, and actually I taught his son in a complete, 360. So I taught his son Leaving Certificate History in the boys' school in Listowel, and we've met many times, and he's thrilled, that he has a doctorate student, and I told him it's all because of him.
That's cute. So now you grew up in a small village. What was your family line? Your siblings?
I do. So I'm the oldest, oldest of 3 girls, myself included, and 1 boy. The boy was the last. So, my parents were very young. They were 20. Mom turned 20 on the day. Dad was only 19. So he was 4 months younger. And then a year and a half-ish, later, they had me. So very young parents. My father was kind of head of the family. His father had died when Dad was 14. So my grandmother was widowed at 36 with 2 children, and had to take over the business. which was a family business. They had a furniture and carpet store since the 1850s roughly. So my grandmother married into it, from Dublin, but then my grandfather and his brother were kind of partners, so the brother sort of backed out of the business and let my nana and dad kind of take over. And so yeah, it was a tough, I think, time. Certainly the 70s and 80s were very depressed in Ireland anyway, so it was, the economy was kind of stagnant, and I remember a lot of the buildings in the town weren't painted, that kind of thing. But we were never conscious of poverty or, certainly there was no boredom. Like, we always worked, we had to dust the furniture in the shop on Saturdays, and my other granduncle had a jewellery store and a toy store, so we worked for him on Saturdays when we got older and, were paid. I waitressed. So it was a busy life, both of my grandfathers were dead. My other grandfather died when I was 4.5, although I have good memories of him. And then my two nanas lived, kind of locally. So we were very lucky. My maternal grandmother lived with us, kind of half of the year in her own house, the other half. So it was a great childhood. Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like you were very hardworking.
Yeah, I think, we were self-employed. So you only have what you make yourself, kind of thing. And, I think my parents were so young too. And we moved house 3 or 4 times, so they were renting an apartment, a flat, in the town when they were married first, and when myself and my sister were born, and then we lived over the shop, and then when I was about 13 we moved back to the countryside, and in our own house kind of thing. So it took them a few years to get established too. And I think, so money was not something you took for granted, and if you wanted something, you saved up for it, or you had your communion money or your birthday, there was no kind of guarantee you were going to get something just because it was Tuesday, But yeah, as I say, we weren't ever conscious of that, we went on Sunday drives every Sunday and had picnics, and, we went to the zoo in Dublin. We did a lot of things, but certainly there weren't, foreign holidays every year or that kind of thing, because my parents, and I suppose this happens in farming families too, you don't get a day off because who's going to take over the store? So weekends away, were kind of a thing, or out to Ballybunion. My grandmother lived in Ballybunion and it was the seaside, so it was as good as a holiday. And we'd stay with my mom out there for weeks in the summer, and Dad would come home every night to there,
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a very, very close-knit family.
Yeah.
That being said, expectations that your family, your parents had for you, maybe pursuing a higher level of education?
Yeah, it was absolutely expected that I would go to college, which is interesting because they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Mom had studied nursing for a little while and hated it, poor thing, couldn't give the injections, she told me, So she left England after about 6 months and was married very quickly after that, to Dad. But I don't really remember having a conversation, except that of course you're going to college, So again, my parents were not experienced, I wasn't experienced. I loved English and history. I sort of wanted to be an actress. I also wanted to be a journalist or a psychologist. So, yeah, so, I was 17 going to college. So I applied for arts at UCD and I did English, history and psychology. And very quickly I discovered that psychology is actually a science degree and you have to be good at math and hypothesis testing and statistics, and I was not. So delighted after the first year to give up, psychology and concentrate on English and history.
That's one. Now, okay, so you said USC? USD?
UCD, so University College Dublin. Yeah, it's the other one, it's not Trinity.
Okay, all right.
It's
now,
the better one.
From where you grew up to Dublin, how far of a commute is that? Is it
hours? So, in those days I went to college in 94. That was before a lot of the highways had been built and things, and dual carriageways. So it really was like a 6-hour journey on the bus, or, you could get the train to Tralee, but somebody had to pick you up. So, yeah, I came home probably once a month.
Okay.
At college. But it was a fun time too. My parents would come to Dublin, it was good. I had one of my best friends from home was in the same university but doing a different course and lived in a different dorm, and my other best friend was in DCU, which might as well have been Timbuktu. It was the other side of Dublin. I think we saw each other once a year or at home. And my other 2 best friends went to Cork. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, did your younger siblings go on for college as well?
They did. So Jennifer, my next sister, did not want to go. It was funny, she wanted to take over the shop kind of thing or work somehow. But as luck would have it, she was dating a boy who was in Limerick. So she agreed to go to University College Limerick with her 2 best friends. So she did public administration and worked for the government for a while in public health. And then came home and opened a store, so the original dream was what she wanted, and she came back to that. So she's been running her own store since, I'd say, 2005, very successfully. And then my younger sister Amy, there's 9 years difference between Amy and I, she went to Cork to do law. So she and I went back to college to do my teacher training degree that year. So we were together in UCC, you know, as freshers, although I tried to give her space. And then my younger brother, Stuart, was a musician. So college, he did study music for a little bit, and now he's gone back and he's doing like sound engineering and all that kind of, you know, the more technical side of stuff. So he was working in a band, and then he, you know, just got jobs like in insurance centres and that kind of thing to pay the rent. He waitressed or waitered, you know, but yeah, college wasn't for him.
So, okay, so you go to college, you get your undergraduate degree. So was that in English and history?
Yeah, we do a double major.
Okay.
So English and history, I suppose by then I knew I preferred history, mostly actually because of the teachers. It's funny, you know, that it's the connection with the people, you know. So I stayed, it's only a 3-year degree in Ireland to get a double major. So I stayed on immediately and did my master's. And actually my master's supervisor is now in America as well, Richard Aldous, who's down at Bard University. So we've had him come and speak at the museum, you know, so it's so funny, the connections. And then I went to work. So I had applied to do a PhD, and I wasn't sure, you know, I think I was working for the summer, and it was the first time in a while that I had disposable income, you know, as opposed to just like ramen noodle college, you know, life. So I thought, you know, I enjoy working actually, yeah. And it was kind of a glamorous job. I worked in the largest real estate agency in Ireland. So it was supposed to be a summer job. You know, I was temping, filled in all the different departments. And then they came to me and asked me if I would like to be like the PR assistant, you know, type thing. So, you know, there was opportunity for extra money because I would show houses at the weekend and lead, you know, open houses and stuff, which I loved. I was going to say I'm nosy, I'm curious. so I loved going into these old like tumble down mansions, you know, on the south side of Dublin, or like just normal houses and see how people lived, you know. But the pay wasn't great, and it was just at the start of the Celtic Tiger, like the property boom. I remember, you know, one day an auction just ran away from us. You know, this house that we had predicted at whatever price literally, you know, maybe trebled.
Wow.
And they went into the showrooms and changed the price on every single house, like with a little sticky tape, you know. So it's something that was a council house or a corporation housing, you know, went from 116 or 96,000 up to 165.
Wow.
And I remember calling my father and saying, I've just missed the property market in Dublin. Like, I will never be able to afford to buy here, you know. And that was my first job, you know. So I stayed with them for a year, and then I moved to another below the line marketing group. So below the line is like none of this fancy stuff, you know, like it's, I ran the Tesco demonstration program. So we were responsible for 75 stores, you know, across the country. And so you were kind of caught in the middle because Tesco were not really your client, but they also, you know, were who were supposed to deliver the product. And then like Kerry Group would say, okay, we want 50 of the stores to run a promotion on our sausages, get those stores to order extra sausages, and we want a woman in there frying sausages and giving out coupons. So we were the go-between, but you know, the stores wouldn't order the extra sausages, the woman wouldn't turn up, we couldn't find a skillet, you know, like every week there was a disaster, you know, just a disaster. And you know, and it kind of worked, but it didn't, you know. But I will say that woman was the best boss I ever had, you know, Katie Dowling, and which is so funny too, because I worked with her husband later. He was a teacher in a school I worked with later on. So
now, why was she your best boss?
She was, you know, we just gelled. Like I hate being micromanaged, and she just had such great trust, you know, that if you knew what you were doing and you could do it, she would let you do it, you know. And so she was never one to like throw you under the bus if it went wrong afterwards. But so plenty of communication, like, do you know what you're doing? Are you comfortable doing it? Okay, great. Keep me informed, you know. And the other thing she did, which another boss who was also a woman, she always gave credit where it was due. So, you know, actually that was my last marketing job, the one I'm talking about now. The second job that I went to, which was a marketing group, I only stayed there for 6 months. I had a woman boss, and she would, you know, swan in and out. And I remember it was an old abandoned church, so scary already, you know, to be working there. And I was there until 2 o'clock in the morning finishing a report for her, you know.
Yeah.
And like I was brought to the meetings with the clients because like she really didn't know what was going on, but she, you know, resented bringing me kind of, you know. So I remember in this one particular display, I left a slide out on purpose, like kind of the slide, you know, to say like how many of their ginger beers that we sold or something ridiculous, you know. And she insisted on presenting the presentation, even though she hadn't done the work, you know, she hadn't run the campaign and she hadn't written the report. So it comes to, you know, the slide and it's not there, and she keeps going because she doesn't realise it's missing. And then the guy asks her, you know, tell us about the ginger beer, and she's like, well, Elizabeth actually might know more about that because, and I was like, yeah, I do, So
and here's the slide.
Yeah, let me tell you. So slid in, and so I deeply resented that. Like I had no problem being a junior to somebody, but all she had to say was, Elizabeth, why don't you present because you worked on the campaign, or don't even present, but thank you for doing the presentation. There was never recognition. Yeah. Whereas Katie Dowling in the last company, so Katie, this I think was important too, because Katie's father had just died when she took the job, so she moved back from England and got a job in Ireland, in Dublin, close to home. She was also from Kerry, as it happens, but not my same town. And while I was in that company, my best friend and the roommate I had been living with since we left college, she had been diagnosed with cancer. It was a 2.5 year kind of battle, and she died while I was in that job. So I got a phone call to my desk one day, and it was her mom, and her mother was kind of, we were all in denial, really. So I had been down to see Maura the weekend previously. I had crashed my car, a guy drove into the back of me, totaled my car, and it was the January after 9/11. And Maura and I had lived together in New York for a summer in 1996, so we were all talking about 9/11, and her mom rang me and said, and I had called every single day that week, how is she doing? Because she had not been good when I saw her at the Saturday. Very, very frail. She couldn't eat. Really, you kind of knew she was on her last legs, but nobody wanted to admit it, So her mom called on the Thursday and said, we don't know if we have minutes or hours. And, she said, I can't believe it's come to this. And I was like, you just told me yesterday, So I left the room, kind of went in to ring mom and dad, and Katie followed me and said, go home, if you need to go home. And so I went home. Her dad called me the next day, which was Friday, and I walked in. She was sort of gone already. She was dying, and I sat with her for a few minutes and told her I'd look after her parents. And then she took this huge breath, and so I knew that was it, and I walked out and let her mom and dad and her brother be with her. And by the time we drove back into the shop, her dad had called to say, she had passed when I was there. So, but he said, I don't know if Elizabeth understood, and I was like, I didn't, so, because I walked in and my nana said, oh, I'm so sorry, and I said, no, she might hang on, and he said, no, Liam just called, So that, I think, was what made me realize, I'm doing jobs I don't enjoy. Just because you're capable and it pays money. And that last job was pretty glamorous. I was high up enough, I was a manager of the accounts. I had people working for me. I had an expense account, which was lovely. But it was not something I enjoyed. And I had lunch with Mary, Maura's mother, a couple of months after her death. And I said, I hate my job. I just hate it. And she said, well, it's because you should be of service. She said, you're selling products nobody needs, and they want to buy them anyway. This is a very thankless job, and she said, maybe it's good for some people, but it's not good for you. So she said, you did English and history, you wanted to be an actress, you should be a teacher. You go into your classroom, you close the door and you act, and you're your own boss. She said, everything about this is what you trained for, So and then Tony Behan, my old history teacher, called and said that sure enough the boys' secondary school in Listowel didn't have a teacher for the following year, and he recommended me. So I met with the principal and I got the job, but I wasn't a qualified teacher. I had a master's, but I wasn't a qualified teacher. So I taught for 2 years there, and then went back and did my teacher training.
So only boys?
Only boys.
And how large of a classroom?
About anywhere between 26 and 31.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, now at the older boys, not as much, because history was a choice, at the older, so there might only be 5. I think I had 11 in one class.
Gotcha.
But those young boys, my God, 27 of them, But there were days, I remember I had one class of 15-year-olds, third years, and oh my God, there was about 6 of them together, feral, kind of, they really, they were just, and I had gone to all girls schools, I was not prepared, for this, and I wasn't a trained teacher, so you don't know, how to react. And I remember, I can't actually remember what the poor kids said, but I had to turn away and I was writing on the board and my shoulders were shaking. I was laughing so hard at what the guy had said. They were so funny, but so not interested in what you were teaching, so, and it was really hard to discipline them. I was, 23 years of age, some of the boys in Leaving were taller than I was. They used to lock me in the classroom and not let me out at the break, it was a nightmare in ways, but and they call me Betty, which it's the only time in my life I've been called Betty.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever run into any of these young men that you taught?
So, you know, it's
Did
so
they
funny.
apologize?
Well, you know, they all had good memories. So, like, one kid, God bless him, you know, came out afterwards as gay and kind of said to me, I think you knew. And I was like, well, you know, like, you had to assume, but I wanted to make it a comfortable place for you.
Sure.
And so, you know, he was very good. He went on to do history and English as well. Several of my students actually went on to do, which is funny, you know.
Yeah.
So one of the boys that I taught, actually, Stephen, is in that job now, you know, in his own school teaching, and another boy that I taught is a teacher in another school. So, like, yeah, it's very fulfilling, you know. I saw a poster one time that said about, like, a teacher is like the pebble that you throw in because you don't know the ripples, you know. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly it.
So you were there for 2 years?
For 2 years, yeah.
And so then?
And then Cork to do my teacher training.
Okay.
And that was the year that Amy went back, Amy went to college to do law, so she studied law. And then that year my grandmother died.
Oh.
So Nana, the first 2 months of college, you know, were horrific because she just got sick. She had diverticulitis. It didn't seem that serious, but, you know, we got 3 kind of, oh my God, you got to come home now calls, you know. And it was a false alarm both times until it wasn't, you know. And so she was intubated in the end. You know, I don't think the hospital gave her much of a chance, you know. Her initial doctor, when we brought her in, said, 81, she's had a good life, you know. And then he went on vacation, and another doctor took over her case and said, this woman has an infection, why isn't she being treated? And we're like, oh my God. And, you know, you're kind of hearing this through the curtains or outside the door, you know. And people in Ireland didn't really question doctors, you know. Maybe they still don't, you know. I know I would be a serious advocate now if you have questions about your healthcare, you know, to ask them. And I think like Nana, you know, she was 81, she was in huge pain because of her tummy. It had swollen, like she couldn't eat, you know. A lot of the doctors were foreign, you know, very bad English, so, you know, she couldn't communicate with her doctor. So if we weren't there with her, you know, they come in on rounds, they fly out. So this is something I think that, you know, I'm very aware of when it comes to my own parents aging, or even myself, you know. So I think that was something. But, you know, to be honest, she died so quickly, and, you know, she was intubated, and it was really not a great way for her to go, because she had been so full of life, you know, 3 months earlier. So I think we kind of prolonged her misery a little bit there, you know, and if we'd had maybe better advice, you know. So she died in October on my brother's 16th birthday. And, you know, I had just gone through with Maura like 2 years earlier, and I said, I can't go through the grief at home. Isn't it weird, you know? So that was one of the major impetus. Like, there was a recruitment fair in Cork from the teacher training program to go to the Middle East.
Oh.
And I said, I'm going to go to the Middle East and just be by myself for a while. You know, I needed space. It was, you know, it wasn't great money at the start. When I changed jobs, it was better, but it was just the opportunity to go there. And, you know, I had actually bought a house in my hometown. My sister Jennifer had married, and there was a little sense of, ooh, you know, here I was at, how old was I? 2005, 27, 29-ish, you know. I can't do the math real quick in my head. 29. And you know, I felt like my life had been written for me. You know, that here I was single, you know, the school marm, spinster type, you know. There was a comment made, you know, I bought a 3-bedroom house out in the country, you know, cheap, you know, but some comment like, well, that's great, you'll have room for mom and dad, you know. And I was like, but like, maybe I'll get married and have kids, you know. So I definitely, and then when Nana died, on top of it all, I thought, yeah, I'm not really staying for this now, you know. So that following, and, you know, we fought all year about it, because I actually didn't even know where I'd accepted the job. I thought I was going to Saudi, and my father said, you'll be killed if you go to Saudi, like, you know, you would be too opinionated, they're not going to, you know, take you in Saudi. So it was Dubai, you know, much different. And you know, but like, they were right up until and of course I got my appendix out. So I was at my best friend's house in Clonmel, her birthday party and a kind of a goodbye party, and I had this terrible pain. Like, I kind of went to bed for the party, and the next day I was in bed and everyone thought, oh my God, she was so hungover. I was like, I didn't even have a drink, you know, I was in agony all night. And her mom had to drive my car home to Listowel. I had to drive myself to the doctor because nobody was taking me seriously, and sure enough, appendicitis. So I had to go to hospital and that. But I was due to fly out, you know, like that week. And so everyone said, oh, isn't this convenient? Like, you're not supposed to go, and we knew you wouldn't go anyway. And I said, I am getting on that plane, you know, come hell or high water. So I called the school and said, like, I have a doctor's certificate, I've just had surgery, I need to push out my departure by, you know, 10 days. but I went, and that first night so because I had missed when everyone was coming in, I think I flew into Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi airport at the time was, kind of small-ish. All of the signs were in Arabic. There must have been 1,000, kind of people from India and Pakistan, and waiting, and there's no sense of personal space, so they're all teeming at the airport into you, and there was this guy with a sign with the name of the school up, and that was who. And so this was 2000 and must have been the September, August of 2006. I definitely did not have a cell phone. I definitely did not have a cell phone. That would work, to call back to Ireland. I'm thinking I had no cell phone, and because we used Skype, to call from the computer. And I get into this guy's car, and we're driving through the desert for an hour and a half. And around minute 50, you're thinking, this doesn't seem right. What am I doing? What am I doing? Surrounded by sand dunes on either side. There was a light, on the highway the whole way out. And I was like, this is just amazing. I'm going to be chopped up into little pieces and never heard from again. And I deserve it, So I said to him, I thought I was teaching in Abu Dhabi. He goes, oh, no, the school is, in Albany, another town. But, it would have been nice to know this ahead of time.
Right.
So the email that I had from the school said I would be living with this girl, Molly. And I get into the apartment. He literally opens the door, puts my suitcase down, good night, and closes the door, 2:00 in the morning. So I'm looking, and I'm standing in a kitchen. There's a bed in the middle of the room down at the end, and then there's a closed door here. And I said, oh my God, she took the bedroom and I have to sleep in this room. So about an hour later, I gathered up my courage to knock on the door, and that was the bathroom. So it was a studio apartment, and it was all to myself. It was lovely.
So no Molly.
No Molly, living next door, yeah. But it was, so that night, I'll never forget, I literally put my head back, and howled. I just cried and cried, and my sister gave me a card written from the dog, she'd put his muddy prints, on the dog, and Jack misses you. And in the middle of this kind of ecstasy, of tears, I said to myself, if you don't stop now, you never will.
Right.
You just have to go to bed now. It'll be bright in the morning, and you can deal with it then. So I slept with the kitchen light on, and I went to, and sure enough, things did look better in the morning, But it was, but it was just that, I knew this was a turning point. If I don't get control of myself now, and the homesickness and the fear, I won't be able to take the step. And it was a step I wanted to take,
right.
So yeah. So you have to make yourself do it sometimes.
So now, what grade did you teach?
So, so that was more of it. We taught the Air Force English. So we, unknown to ourselves, had been contracted by. We were supposed to be going to a normal school.
Yeah.
But we were contracted out to the Air Force. So they were high school kind of cadet, ages. Very interesting. So I stayed there for a year. I'm very mobile in my jobs. So I stayed there for 1 year. I taught the following year for the government as well, but we taught the teachers. So it was updated pedagogy. We were based in a school, and we kind of shadowed 2 or 3 teachers, elementary school teachers, which wasn't my, kind of background. And then the last 2 years I moved to Dubai, and I taught in a private international baccalaureate school, which was fabulous. So, the money was better. I actually preferred Albany, the little city that I lived in, because you got to know the locals more, and there was more of a diverse community among the expats. Whereas in Dubai, it's such a big city, that we kind of just, you live with your teachers, and you go to school, and, there was lots to do socially, but I didn't really move out of my circle the way I had in Albany. I was part of a drama group down there, and a reading club, and very full life in Albany. Dubai, not so much, but we worked, we tutored kids, there was a lot of money kind of to be made, and so it was in the middle of all of that last year in Dubai that I decided, why am I in Dubai? I wanted to live in New York all my life, why, if I made the break to leave home, then I should at least be someplace I want to be, so I applied to colleges in New York and Fordham, and why? Oh, because Daniel Sawyer was this Jewish historian, or historian of Jewish New York, that I knew I wanted to kind of work like him, and and I got in, and so I was accepted in maybe the March, April, I think, of my final year, and came home for the summer, and then 2009 came to New York. Yeah.
So you go on, you get your Ph.D.
Get my Ph.D. I'm teaching the whole time because, I was already qualified, and I was assistant dean of the Institute of Irish Studies down there. So a little bit of, kind of paperwork with students who were doing a minor. We often had speakers come to the institute, to give talks and things. So it was a good, active kind of little life. There was a Columbia Irish History Roundtable that I attended and stuff. So that was great, very busy. I gave walking tours with a walking company down in New York. I babysat, you do a little bit of everything. And I lived in a very Irish neighbourhood in the Bronx, Woodlawn. So not really by choice. The first year I didn't. I lived in Fordham in the Italian section, little, Arthur Ave.
Yeah.
And then I have to say it was kind of comforting, being back at Woodlawn with chocolate and tea and crisps, all of our local kind of foods. I have an uncle up there and
nice.
And a cousin. So, and a girl I lived with at Fordham, and I made the choice to move there. So it was 5 minutes on the train, or you could get the bus to Fordham, and then the subway into the city. So it was great. And then I finished my PhD. I was still teaching at Fordham, and I was teaching at St. Joseph's College in Brooklyn. And, it's a precarious enough as an immigrant life. You have to have a full-time job, but how can you be hired full-time, So it was just tricky. I was working 3 jobs. None of them were enough on their own. And I saw this job advertised. Oh no, I didn't. I knew someone who had heard the job was coming up. Yeah. And so then I looked for the advert and I sent in my CV. I suppose this was kind of late summer of 2017. And I interviewed first in November. So I had never been. I had been to Albany once. Amy did the bar, the New York bar, about 3 or 4 years earlier. And so as luck would have it, I came up and stayed at the Hilton around the corner from the old museum, and we would go every day to the plaza. I waited for her. She did these exams with thousands of people, I sat at the food court, and it was amazing. 2 days, but so I had been to Albany, and I had been to Troy because my roommate was from Troy at college. And I interviewed in November, and then I interviewed again in February, and then found out in March I got the job. But of course at that point we're in the middle of a term, so for the first, we began work after Easter that year, because I had booked to go to California to my sister for Easter, and I started on the 4th of April or something, but I had to go to Fordham every Monday and Thursday on the train to teach my 2 classes and come back, So, but it was great. So I started up here in August in our old building, and the rest is history.
Well, if you think about this, you've moved this organization from its previous location to this beautiful new location. Yeah. And that really has to do with you. It does. It does. You saw an opportunity and you took advantage of that.
Well, it was one of the first things I remember. Even maybe it was the second job interview. The board did say that they were looking, to move, and it's complicated, I suppose, when you're a chartered, museum. The feeling was that we had to stay in Albany, although some people were kind of open to Troy, but I think the legislators had kind of anticipated that we would be staying, in Albany. And then, you're kind of looking at demographics. Where are our audience? We were in downtown Albany. The number one complaint we had was that there was no parking, all these kinds of things in the old building. So that was a kind of a toss-up. Like, if you're running a museum, you don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere, because there won't really be the foot traffic going past it. Whereas, like, here at the weekend, people are on their way to lunch and, we'll pop in here. Or we can trade off each other, So actually over the summer, like, we'll be working with Tenbrook and another museum to do a kind of an immersion trail, and they'll hit all 3 museums, So the fact that you're in the city, I think, is very advantageous there. But a lot of our events are after hours. They're with an older demographic, and so that was something that we were kind of conscious of. But this space is so fabulous. We have the theatre, seat 65. We have parking, so like it kind of hit all the boxes. Yeah.
So this is wonderful. You have an extraordinary life path. If you think about it, you've traveled extensively. You've tried different positions, and it sounds to me like you're seeking happiness and being content with what you're doing. Yeah. And that says a lot about you. So often people kind of put themselves in a position and tolerate it because of maybe salary or the fear of taking that leap, that giant leap of faith. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
I do.
Yeah.
And so what advice would you give younger women, older women who are maybe in that position? Like, gosh, I'm really not happy with what I'm doing, or I think I always wanted to try this, but I'm afraid to take that leap.
Yeah, I do think for women especially there is a lot of expectations, self-limitation. In one way you could say I'm lucky, like I'm not married, I don't have children, so it was always easy for me to pick up and go, or pack and move. But I do think I'm a big believer in my gut, so like I have been in situations, you know, even the car ride from the airport, where like all of a sudden you're kind of thinking, oh God, like this was not thought through, you know, or there's some like tingling little bell. And so, not that your gut is necessarily always right, but you know, I've learned to listen to that voice, you know. And so I do think, you know, I firmly believe like we're not here for a long time or for a good time, you know, like you have to make the most of your life. You know, you kind of get one chance. I don't know whether I believe, you know, in an afterlife or any of that. And that mightn't even really be relevant because it'll be over anyway. So like you have 80 something years to do the best you can here, you know, to live up to your potential. I remember years ago, I think it was a priest was kind of saying like basically it's a sin not to use your potential, like that this was a gift that you've given from God. And so like if you're only living a half a life, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And you know, so definitely like I think when Maura died, you know, I was 24, 25, those are foundational things. I think that, you know, what is important to me and how can I achieve happiness. And so, you know, I don't have a 401k. I was going to say I don't have a huge 401k. I don't have any 401k. But that kind of isn't it. Like I do think if you're happy in the moment, you know, and obviously particularly as a single woman, you do have to kind of plan. Maybe you have to be aware of certain things. But I don't believe in compromise for the wrong reasons, you know. And so I definitely would not put up with a job anymore like where I was being bullied or abused or taken for granted. You know, this job is very challenging at times, there's no doubt about it, you know, like it's very exciting in lots of ways, you know. As you say, we've moved, but we're dealing with the pandemic, we were closed for 6 months, you know, our membership is up, but so are expenses sometimes, you know. And then you do worry about the long term, like how sustainable is it if, you know, if most of my members are 60 plus, why are there children who are my age not embracing, you know, their culture? And so the link with Ireland is getting more tenuous for Irish Americans because it's another generation out. So sometimes I worry about that, you know, like that what is our longevity, you know, and particularly because we're chartered in a certain way, like we're not an immigration museum, we're an Irish American museum, you know. And so, you know, we'll find ways to kind of create links with other groups and stuff, of course, but you have to be able to grow. Like you can't be this monolithic monument to the past, you know. And so I am very conscious of that, like that, you know, we talk about our heritage here at the museum, but actually it's a living culture, you know. And so I'm conscious of that we have to embrace the history, but we also have to kind of have links. So, you know, we had the Black and Irish, for instance, people, you know, this past February with Black History Month, that Ireland is changing. And so if Ireland is changing, that means Irish America is changing, you know. So my advice, particularly to women, is listen to your gut, you know, and it's not wrong to want things, you know. I think that's okay too. And if it's, you know, kind of money, you know, that's okay. If money is your driver, you know, that's okay too. But I don't believe in subsuming your own desires because society or somebody tells you otherwise, you know. And I think if you're in a relationship, you have to compromise. I understand that. So I've been lucky that I haven't had to compromise. But I do think it's important that women are true to their vision of themselves.
Well, I have to say, we're lucky. We're lucky that you said, yes, I will more than willing to be interviewed for our first episode of Let's Have a Conversation. And so on behalf of Colony Senior Service Centers and the Irish American Heritage Museum, I want to thank Dr. Elizabeth Stack for talking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy St. Pat's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.